have my notes here on my laptop. All of my Bible verses are going to be on here. Before we actually get into the whole video, I want to say that your relationship with God starts with you believing. So if you don't believe in God yet, you came across this video trying to start your faith journey with God, your relationship with God, the first step is your belief. All you have to do is just believe in God, believe that Jesus is Lord, believe that God raised him from the dead, and you are saved. Romans chapter 10, verse 9 through 10 says, if you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is with your heart that you believe and are justified. It is with your mouth that you profess your faith and are saved. So those are the only things that you need to do. No one should tell you anything different. It clearly says, what is it you believe? You profess it, you are saved. We're going to talk about what it actually looks like to get closer to God. Like, how do you know you're closer to God? I think a lot of people tell us how to get closer to God, but how do you know? Like, how do I know I'm closer to God? A feeling? Will God tell me, like, hey, you're closer to me? Like, what is it? So that's the first thing. The second thing, we're actually going to talk about how to get closer to God. The last thing I'm going to talk about is just tools and community to help you in the daily of getting closer to God. What does it actually look like? How do I know that I'm closer to God? What is the marker? What is the measurement? Psalms chapter 1, verse 1 through 3 says, blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in companies with mockers, but those who delight in the law of the Lord, who meditate on his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. This tells us exactly what does it look like to get closer to God. It's about being steadfast in your faith, in your walk with God, in your relationship, planted next to him, spiritually being close to him. We're planted like that tree that is planted by the streams of water. It's continually being fed. That's what getting closer to God looks like. It's like you're coming back for more, you're coming back for more. Once that happens, you know you're closer to God is because you yield fruit. Right? And this really means you are acting different, you're speaking different, your behavior is different, you're thinking differently, right? You're thinking higher like God, you're more reflecting his image. That's what it means to get closer to God. My favorite things about this is that fruit, right? That fruit, that difference in you, that transformation comes no matter the season, which yields its fruit in season and whose leaves do not wither, whatever they do prosper. And so, in some translation, I think the NLT translation says, they yield fruit in each season, right? You don't stop yielding fruit. You don't stop transforming. You don't stop growing. You don't stop being patient. No matter if life is dysfunctional, no matter if it's hard, no matter if things are just all over the place, you're always healing. You're always growing because you're planted with God. You're steadfast in your love, in your pursuit of God. Galatians 5:23 says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, or patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. Because Jesus in John 15:4-5 says, remain in me, and I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. When Paul talks about the fruit in Galatians, he's referring to the fruit that Jesus is talking about here, right? He's saying that when we remain in God, when we remain, the fruits of the Spirit, how we get closer to God is when we see fruit, we see joy, we see peace, we see forbearance, we see forbearance, no matter the season, right? And these three verses are one of my favorite verses because you can see how like everything is connecting. Old Testament, Jesus's words, and then Paul, like all of these are talking about fruit. This is a lifelong journey. One of the things that I realized in this season right now, the fruit that I'm more, bearing, or the thing that like God is transforming me into, self-control. I have been overweight and, obese for a really long time. And this is something that I prayed to God as a God, I don't want to be in this physical state. I have gut issues. Like I have some heart things. There's just so many things that have happened. I get dizzy. I had a knee injury, which obviously losing weight would really help me heal faster. So in this last season, I've been really praying, God, help me get this weight off. Help me have the self-control. This is a fruit that God is producing in me. And one of the ways I know this is the Holy Spirit, I know this is of God, is because in the past, I've always read that self-control as in like I'm producing the fruit, right? Like it's self-control, like I need to have self-control. But It's the fruit of the Spirit. It's a byproduct of the Spirit. It's a byproduct of me being steadfast, staying planted with God, remaining in Jesus. That's how you know I'm closer to God, because right now I'm not relying on my own discipline. I'm not. I have been fasting, which that's the method I'm using to lose weight. And if you want me to talk about that more, just go ahead and leave in the comments. Fasting takes a lot of self-control. It takes a lot of refraining, right? You're literally refraining from eating for a certain amount of time. And I tried fasting in the past and I just wouldn't stay with it. My job, they always have food, all kinds of things. I've just been like, no, it has just given me such a clear mind. I'm not relying on my own self-control, because my own self-control, that is just an example of what it means to get closer to God. There's a clear transformation when we're closer to God. It is clear. There's no way you can get closer to the God of the universe and not be transformed in one way or another. In Romans 12:2 says, don't conform to the behaviors and customs of this world, but let God transform you by changing the way you think. There's a clear metamorphosis, there's a clear transformation of us when we are closer to God. God changes our thinking. God changed my thinking around food, around weight, around my body, around my image. So now we've talked about what it looks like to get closer to God. Let's talk about how to actually get closer to God. In order for us to get closer to God, we have to see the humanity in God, because God created us to connect with Him and connect with other people, and we're social beings. And if we don't see God as a person, we don't see the person, the humanity of God, it's so much harder to get closer to Him, because He's just this being up in the sky. We see God as relatable. It's so much easier to get closer to Him, to have a relationship with Him, because we know how to have a relationship with people. So how do we have a relationship with God of the universe, who is a person, right? We know this because Jesus, the person of Jesus, is the incarnation of God. In order for us to know God, to get closer to God, we get closer to Jesus. In John 14:6, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. We can't get closer to God the Father without getting closer to Jesus. He is the bridge of our faith. He gets us close to the Father. If I can relate to Jesus, I can see that He's human, and I can talk to Him like a friend. So here's some of my favorite relatable things about Jesus. He was hardworking. He was a carpenter. And in Mark 6:3, it says, isn't this the carpenter, the son of Mary and brother of James? He had a sense of humor. And one of my favorite stories in the Bible is when He turns water into wine. And in this passage, his mom is like, hey, we ran out of wine at the wedding. And he's like, okay. Basically, that's what I would say. He basically says, okay. And his response was, woman, why do you involve me in this? In other translation, he said, how is that my problem? My time has not come. He's like, Mom, what do you want me to do? So I just love that. I think it's funny. He was tempted. Jesus was tempted. We know that in Matthew 4. Basically, the whole chapter of Matthew 4 is of Jesus being led into the wilderness to be tempted. Just like God leads us into seasons that are hard to test us. He was hated. He was betrayed. He was abandoned. We see this in John 15. If the world hates you, you know that it hated me first. He was betrayed. Judas betrayed Jesus. We see that in Matthew 26 and other places in the Gospels. He was abandoned by his own disciples. Peter denied Jesus, right? Left Him, said, I don't know you, rejected Him. And then also his disciples, right when he's getting persecuted, he's getting murdered, they all left. In Matthew 26:56, it says, then all the disciples left Him and fled. They left Him. People that walked with Him for imagine you had friends, close friends for 3 years, and at your worst moment, they're just like, peace out. I don't know who you are. I mean, the hurt in that, the trauma in that. He had feelings. In John 11:35, this is when Jesus went to revive Lazarus. Jesus wept. He didn't just shed a tear. He wasn't just sad. Jesus wept. Matthew 26:38, this is in the Garden of Gethsemane. He said to them, my soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch with me. Right? He asked the disciple, I'm in anguish. Stay here with me. Jesus felt these things. So those are just a few things that I try my best to remember about Jesus, especially when I'm going through this, when I feel misunderstood, when I feel betrayed and abandoned and alone. Jesus felt these things. If I remember these things, it's going to help me get closer to Him. So how do you get closer to God? You see God differently. And God will help you with this. Ask God, help me see you in the way that I need to see you. The second way for us to get closer to God is, we all have heard this, is to spend time with Him. And I just want to give you a few things for you to try some suggestions of how to spend time with him. Maybe you're having a hard time doing that, because this is something that I struggle with. First thing is the voice of the enemy, like this voice of perfection is saying you have to spend time with God for a certain amount of time every single day, or you're not holy enough, or you're not spiritual enough. That is the lies. Perfectionism, condemnation is not of God. That is not of God. So lay down perfectionism. Jesus did not come for me to be perfect. He was perfect. I don't have to be perfect, right? I just have to progress. Progress. God is into progress. Do not overcomplicate this. Do not perfectionalize this. Do not type A this thing, because I'm type A. I want to make sure everything's good. I have my coffee. I have my Bible. I have my this. Like, the more you try to make it perfect, you try to create the aesthetic to read your Bible, it's not going to happen, because that's a lot of work. That's a lot of mental, just let's lower the bar. My pastor always says, lower the bar, bring it down. I had to find out what it meant to spend time with God. What does that actually look like for me? Not like how my mom does it, how my friend does it, my pastor does it. What does it look like for me? And what I found out is that for me, it's journaling. That's the biggest way for me that I spend time with God, is I journal. I write my prayers down. In the car, a lot of the time I spend when I'm going to work, in the car, I talk to God. I have worship music, and I try my best to make sure I pray before bed and when I wake up. My parents were adamant about this, and I used to feel guilty if I don't pray when I wake up right away, or if I don't pray right before I go to bed, or something is gonna come get me. Like, it was like almost like a fear thing in me. But I told God, I was like, you know what, God, I don't want my brain to have negative connotations when it comes to prayer. So I'm just gonna lower the bar. So sometimes I pray and sometimes I don't. No one comes into my marriage and tells me how to spend time with my husband. Nobody does that. Nobody comes into your friendships and tells you how to spend time with your friends. No one does that. No one should come and tell you how to spend time with God. It's between you and God. And one of the prayers that I've been praying recently is, God, how does this work for us? Like, what is the best way for us? How do we do this? You know, and God opens up these slots. For me, it's been my lunch break. I have 30 minutes of my lunch break. I sit down, I journal, and the other 30, I just kind of take a break, refresh to get back to work. So, and I've been so consistent with that, because in the past I've been like, I need an hour, I need 2 hours to pray and worship and do that. It's not consistent. That whole point is to be consistent, right? Like the verse we read first in Psalms 1, it says day and night, right? That's day in, day out. What can you do day in, day out? And then let's do baby steps. And usually when I start off 30 minutes of my lunch break, I end up doing it the whole lunch break, because it's so good, because I'm just like there. I'm just like planted in that stream, and I'm drinking and I'm being filled. It's usually momentum. You just need momentum to start, and then God is going to do the rest. It's also asking him questions, getting to know him. I'm like, God, how are you? You know, how are you today? And he's always good, right? God is always good. He's always good. Just like in a deep human relationship, we need to get to know each other. I need to get to know God, and God, I get to know God through his word, but also through how he speaks through me. Conversations with God, it shows a deep relationship. It shows that there's an exchange of ideas, of thoughts, discussion, right? There's a back and forth. There's conversations that you have. One of my favorite things about my marriage is my conversations with my husband. I love those, and they're so good, but they can never amount to the conversations I have with God. My conversations with God are so important to me, because I ask him, I wait. Sometimes I'm impatient. I don't wait. I'm like, God, and I move on to the next thing, you know, and God's been like, slow down, right? God slows me down, because I talk fast. I think fast. My thoughts are just going and going. One thing that I'm working on, it's so hard. One thing I'm working on is to tell God first. An example of this is like when something happens, you got some tea at work, some drama, anything, you're mad, you're upset. You want to tell somebody first, whether it's your best friend or someone, you want to tell somebody. So one of the things I've been trying to do is tell God first. Instead of just going and tell my husband or my best friend or my sister, whoever, I tell God first. I'm like, God, guess what happened? And I just do it in the same tone that I would do it, you know, like, I got tea for you, Lord. I think for me, this has been a way for me to just pause. It helps me just see God as a friend, that I can tell him anything, because we think that we only tell God the big things or the spiritual things, but God wants every corner of our lives. So this has been helping me kind of see I can tell God anything. Those are just 3 ways for you to get closer to God. So the last part of this, we're going to talk about some tools. The first thing that I would say is a Bible. The Bible app is perfect. I'll probably put a picture or a video of me scrolling through my Bible app. I don't do a whole lot with it. I used to do follow plans and all that stuff, but I've been getting more back into my physical Bible. So my Bible app is just there for a resource. Other thing I would I would encourage for you, if you haven't checked it out, is the Bible Project. They break down so many things, so many themes. They break down books of the Bible. I think they've done pretty much the whole Bible. And they actually have a podcast that started in January that's going through the Sermon on the Mount. And I started, I think, the first 4 or 5 episodes of that podcast, and I kind of fell off. But it's just, they're so in depth. They really study the word. They study everything. They give a lot of cool things that like you wouldn't even think to know about the Bible. And I've been following them for a long time now, and they have really helped me fall in love with just like the word, like just like the actual Bible, the physical Bible, how it was written. The other thing as far as like a Bible tool is a Bible commentary. There's all kinds of them online. If you just look up Bible commentary, and a lot of them will come up. One of the things that I use is called Enduring Word. That's the Bible commentary I use. And I like these when I'm doing a deep dive into a book of the Bible. Right now, I'm kind of diving into Psalms 119. Commentaries help me because they help me dive deep into what that verse is saying. Like another thing that I use is the Abide meditation podcast. I use mine on Spotify. I know they have the Abide app you can get, but I like the meditation because there are times where I don't want to read my Bible. I don't feel like praying, but just meditating, and it walks you through like one theme, whether it's anxiety, anger, forgiveness. It walks you through one theme, and they're like 15-ish minutes long, and you just get to answer questions and reflect. It's such a good way to reflect if you are just starting. So it's the Abide Meditation Podcast. I think that's what it's called. I'll put it up and in the description. A couple of books that I would recommend is In His Image and None Like Him. I tell you, I've read these books over and over again. They're so good. They really help just see God for who he is. Like In His Image is so good about showing how we are created to reflect him. And then None Like Him is just showing the attributes of God that set him apart. Those are so good. Crazy Love by Francis Chan, so good. Voice of the Heart by Chip Dog. That one is a really good one, just really talking about feelings and emotions. Those are the tools. The main tool and the main support that you can have is a community. So if you are just starting your faith journey, or maybe you're getting back into church, or maybe you're just trying something different, I would say that get into a church. One of the things that we did when we moved states and we had to find a different church was we started watching them online. Nowadays, pretty much everybody is online. Watch a few services, get to see the vibe, pray about it. Then you can decide if you want to invest and go into the actual in-person service. I would say get small groups in the churches that you're in. If you are in a church and you're not in a small group, it's so important. I grew up like being in small groups all the time, and then for a while I just stopped going, but now I'm trying to get back into a small group. Those are the ways that I've been getting closer to God. This has been really helping me. And like I said, a huge example of me getting closer to God is that I'm finally having this discipline, this consistency that is coming from the Holy Spirit. A lot of us have these goals, a lot of goals that we want in life, whether that's money, that's our body, whatever, all these different goals, and we don't involve God in it. And for me, I know I've gotten closer to God in the last few months because I'm involving God in my goals, my weight loss goals. I've seen the weight come off. I was like, it really took me just literally abiding and being here and God helping me. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that it was informative. It was helpful. Praying for anyone who casts their eyes on this video that they would grow and that God would meet them where they're at. Make sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one, my friend. Bye.